Hello and welcome to Heavy Matters podcast. It's me, Venny, and it is my pleasure to be joined by Andromeda from the band Folterkammer. Now, I'll get my apologies in early if I get any of the pronunciation not quite right. Please feel free to dive in.
Everything's fine so far.
Okay, so far so good. It might go downhill from here, but they released their album Riebermacht.
Weibermacht.
Ooh, close. Hit the bar with that one. Weibermacht.
Yeah, good.
What was it? 2 weeks ago.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Perfect. So Andromeda, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. Hi.
Hey. So the album's been out 2 weeks. What's been the reaction to it?
Really intense, like the music, no? It actually is really overwhelming, and to have so many reactions from all over the place. And I mean, I know it's a very provocative album. The topics are very provocative, and the whole music too, very theatrical. Also, there is a little touch of humor here and there, and I know in metal that's always a special thing, right? So yes, there are. I personally always love it when a piece of art, no matter if it's music or whatever, shocks me or surprises me, like gives me a huge reaction. And I noticed that some people have that with that album too. And no, but it already triggered so many interesting conversations about so many topics, and I couldn't be more happy about that. And the same goes for my bandmates. Yeah. No, the reactions are actually really great. Thank you.
It's great. I mean, it's like you say, there's so much music out there now, and so much of it can be so kind of bland and safe and in the middle of the road. And there's a whole discussion about AI music and everything else. But you're right to actually, in this day and age, generate something that is actually truly original and to actually provoke reaction, like you say, it is something quite rare these days.
Yes, and personally, for me, it's really important that whatever I do in music, it's not comfortable. You know, for me, music, and especially metal, and even more black metal, should be like it's something. It's opposition, it's rebellion, it's revolution. It's not just entertainment, you know. If it has everything, if it's also entertaining, great. But the first thing I want to do is as I said, I enjoy being shocked or surprised, and I love to give that too. And if that is with the music I create, like all these different combinations which are odd in a certain way sometimes, or with the lyrics, with the topic I'm singing about, or the way how I sing, or the way how the guys play, I think that's something that is really dear to me, to not be comfortable, but to really push and to dare. I like to be on the borderlines of styles and of what is actually like good taste and bad taste. You know what I mean? I love to play with extreme contrast, and I think that Weibermacht is it turned out nicely in this regard. You know, like I enjoy it too. I enjoy listening to it actually.
Good. I mean, speaking of uncomfortable, this is you're speaking to a slightly prudish British man, and some of the subject matter on the album and the art you present is it is on the edge, isn't it? And it is certainly set out to shock. So tell us, why don't you
I mean, I'm sorry for that question. In the meaning of, I mean, the most obvious topic people see on that album or hear is the topic of femdom or BDSM, right? But that's just one of the topics. The topic is Weibermacht in general. I don't know if you know the terminology, what it means. It's an official terminology.
Tell us.
It comes from art and cultural history. It's an official terminology that goes back to the medieval times of German-speaking Europe. And it's about the depiction in art of a woman a dominant woman and a submissive man. And the man is always a very powerful or very handsome or a very respectful man, a wise man, you know, like Aristotle, for example. He was a famous character in these Weibermacht presentations. And during that time, it was not common for a woman to be dominant whatsoever or to have any influence or impact. She was meant to be submissive and calm and serving the man. It was they suppose that these stories were brought during the, how you say, crusades. I'm sorry for my English.
Crusades, yeah, perfect. Yeah,
yes,
yeah,
and they were popular, these stories, actually, because they were so provocative. But conservative Christians, they used these stories to kind of warn people of strong women or cunning women or women who could be, how do you say, deceitful, like, you know, tricking a man into to be humiliated or to, you know, whatever, losing power. Actually, that was what it was all about. And there were tons of stories going around and pictures, like paintings and statues and even daily products, you know, people used with that depiction on it. It was a really famous thing. Okay. And that's the tradition of Weibermacht. And there were different kind of stories and everything that under this motive. And also, I mean, the most obvious figure that we know as a woman who stands for this is the dominatrix. And we associate her with the modern time, but BDSM goes back really far. So these are stories that are known in the Bible already, or even further down, or in ancient Greek mythology. That's so interesting. And I thought, when I want to be rebellious in metal, how do I do that? In metal, and especially in black metal, you always have the symbolism of Satanism, you know, which was a counterculture during that conservative time, like the conservative Christian time back then. And they used Satan as this obvious, strong image, you know, to have this rebellion thing going on. And I thought, nowadays, Satanism is not so provocative anymore. I'm not religious. I'm not a Satanist. But I'm a woman in this world, and I'm a woman who's in extreme metal, you know, or metal jazz, whatever I'm doing. And to be a woman, sometimes it can also already be very provocative. And you can, I'm not a shy person or a submissive kind of woman. I'm really not like that. I have humor, I'm cheeky, and I'm independent. And I also know that the topics of like feminist topics are still considered to be provocative among many people. And in metal, there are still a lot of men in music, you know, not just in metal, but also. And I thought the attributes we have, or the stylistics, are really in the aesthetics of men in many ways. And I didn't want to be a princess, you know. I also don't want to be trying to be like a guy, you know. I'm a woman and I have a language of my own. And I felt like that's what I want to give into black metal. Something very feminine, something strong, something cheeky also, and also something that is sensual. Where do you have sensual black metal, you know? And I thought the dominatrix, like Baphomet, is a very strong figure, a symbol. And so that's why I chose this topic. But it goes into so many things, actually, not just the obvious one, you know? And that's great, because that's what all the conversations about this album are about. And yeah, that's
that's I mean, that is fascinating. And the macht in that translation, does that mean machine, or is that
no? So vibe actually is a kind of rather rude word for a woman in German. Normally the word is Frau, singular, and Frauen, plural, right? But when you say a vibe, it's an older word. It's like when a man is disgusted by a woman, or when she's considered to be like ugly or annoying, he calls her, that vibe, you know, kind of like that bitch, you know. It's not word by word translation of bitch. So what I would say is like, it's something, a word between woman and bitch in English. And power, Macht is power. So
power. Fine. Okay. Wow, that's fascinating. And did you want to have that slightly historical aspect to the
Yeah,
story as well. And I mean,
very
you
much so.
do get that as well from the music as well, and that slightly baroque feel to the music that all essentially feeds into that imagery.
Totally. I mean, even the band name kind of suggests like a historical connotation somehow. We, people always put us in this category of symphonic metal, which makes sense since we make we have this influence of classical music, but we don't work with orchestral sounds. For example, we don't use those string arrangings or things like this. It's more like we play like in a smaller unit, like a metal band that plays classical music, like a recital, when a small formation of classical musicians play a piece, not an opera, but maybe an aria from an opera, or like then they call this like a chamber music. But since we're a metal band, it's more like torture chamber music. That's how I have to explain the band name. And what you can see is the contrast, like the which I told you in the beginning. Contrast is very important to me in art, and like the dominatrix embodies something beautiful and something ugly or dangerous, and as much as she has something superior like classical music or opera or the establishment kind of representing, and then you have black metal and the dangerous thing and the spikes and the dirty things she does and the ugly things she does and the humiliation and everything, and you have those, all these contrasts everywhere. I think that's what plays in all of this. That's what we try to do with that band. And the classical music, I mean, I have a classical singing background. That's how I started off. Laurent, our bass player, is actually a classically trained guitarist, but then went into jazz, and he's a heavy cat on as a jazz bassist. So, but we all have this love for opera, and we think this contrast of something so playful and elaborate within black metal is really weird, because black metal is always brutal and raw, and there is like this punk attitude that goes with it. So we thought like that's the perfect combination of everything. I don't know if I answered your question well already.
No, yeah, definitely. I mean, it's super interesting.
In the void of talking.
Not at all. It's super interesting, and I think front and center of the music is your vocal. I think the music's super interesting in its own right, but certainly when we were reviewing the album, you hit play on the album, the music comes in, you think, okay, I think I know what I'm dealing with here. And then your vocal comes in, Andromeda, and it totally changes any perception that you might have had about it. And it is really unique. And yeah, there are symphonic bands, and you might not wish to be discussed in the same breath of as such as bands as like Nightwish and Epica and these types of bands. But to me, your vocal has a lot of other elements to it, and other artists, and I kind of hear some Kate Bush and some Roxy music, and so it isn't just pure operatic and symphonic. There's a lot more going on there to me when I listen.
That's true. And I mean, where should I start? Like in symphonic metal, there are not really singers who really sing bel canto. They always make some kind of a musical approach in their singing. It has to do with many factors. There are some singers who have classical singing training, you can hear that, but they don't fully sing bel canto. I use some moments where there is a lot of bel canto singing, actually. That's what I try to do, to actually really work with that sound. But not only, because
Do you mind just telling us what bel canto is?
Yes, of course.
So enlighten us.
Bel canto is the sound we associate with opera. Just that's bel canto, right? When you sing modern, it's more pitchy, more flat in sound, more silent. You have this, and bel canto is a sound that helps you to maintain a healthy voice while singing without any amplification over a full orchestra. And that's a long tradition and a long study of making the perfect effortless sound, which is strong and loud enough for people to be heard on top of the orchestra. We all have
and that presumably was in the days without amplification and without microphones and those kind of things. Yeah,
there is that's a science of how these buildings were built, you know, for the opera houses, for the acoustics. Acoustic is a huge topic, and to sing like this and in a healthy way, you need a proper technique for that. And with that goes a certain sound, which was completely cultivated. Every person has a slightly different sound. In opera, we started to have the different registers, like soprano, mezzo soprano, alto, tenor, baritone, bass, and so forth. There are even subcategories, right? So there are different colors and different weights in the voice and different, like, you know, like the superpower you have in your voice is different with every person. And so when you sing bel canto, it's about a certain sound, and it's also a very technical singing style. You have to do many different things. It's so challenging to sing opera. Really, it's really a high art form. And the bel canto is really that sound. That's it, and it comes with the romantic phase of opera, like with composers such as Verdi and Puccini and stuff. In Baroque times, the singing was slightly different. The sound was different, the aesthetic was different. Vibrato was not so much allowed, you know. There were more like ornaments and trills and things like this. So styles always changed, even in classical music, like in metal, sorry. You have different subcategories and styles, you know. So in Folterkammer, we don't only use the Baroque influence. I never sing Baroque style. What I do is I have the influence of romantic opera music in my sound, and also more contemporary, which is probably what you notice, that it has a slightly different sound. I don't only work with the bel canto, with the full bel canto sound, but I also work with different modern singing techniques, and I always jump when I think like this phrase needs this or that. I don't think if it has to be really in bel canto or not. I just modulate. But if I want, I could just do it like this or like that. You know, I trained enough. I can switch also with the metal screams. Since my voice type is the one of a dramatic coloratura soprano, that means very loud, very high. Even for a soprano, I'm high.
Okay.
And very agile. So when I do metal screams, they also sound higher. That's why black metal is a little bit obvious for me as a singer, because even if I do gutturals, they still sound high. Whereas with singers with lower voices, they would sound much lower. Which is frustrating. I would love to have a low voice, but doesn't work. And so yes, I play with all kinds of things because I love all kinds of music and I love to jump around. And as you said, Kate Bush, I love Kate Bush. You know, I do a lot of fusion music, progressive rock music too, a lot of jazz. And so there are these influences too. And I love rock bands, in fact, like a lot of British bands, you know.
Yeah. Do you think that's why it sounds original to us? Because, like you say, a lot of the symphonic influences in metal or heavy music, call it what you will, have been modernized somewhat. So do you think when we hear your voice, it does sound just genuinely different to us because that's not really done so much, or has been done so much?
I mean, there are bands like, for example, Therion. They had like I think one of them was really a classical singer. Not every classical singer is an opera singer, but yes, like what we associate with it, using bel canto sound. And I think it was really cool. I think what is maybe new for people is that somebody does the bel canto and the metal screams at the same time, and the modern singing styles too, and knows how to jump between all these styles. I think that might be confusing or even surprising for some, depending on how you perceive the voice. And yes, maybe it's also because we're not used to it. Most people, they don't really, I mean, some do know opera, but there are not really a lot of connoisseurs of opera in younger generations, unfortunately. And but they are used to musical sounds, and the musical singing is like in between modern and operatic aesthetics, you know. And you have to know that the classical singing, the bel canto singing, I always try to imagine it like a horizontal kind of how you make music. There is not a groove in classical music, in opera. It's not about this. It's about the dynamics, of the whole story you are singing. Whereas in modern music, like rock, pop, jazz, whatever, it's all about the groove. It's more vertical. So certain sounds of the voice in bel canto, they will only start to work when you let it go without, So you have to make like it's like a compromise you do as a singer when you try to apply bel canto to something like so vertical, such as pop music or rock or whatever. So that's maybe what you notice. It's like I try to find my way to live it all at the same moment. But yes,
That's
I think
fantastic.
I think what makes Folterkammer interesting, at least from my perspective as a musician, is that all of us in the band have extremely different backgrounds, but we all contribute to the music. We all contribute to the compositions, and I think we leave a lot of freedom, to each other when it comes to what we give in. And then that's what you hear, all these different backgrounds, all these quotations from this and that. And then when you mix it, like a cocktail, that's what you have with Folterkammer. Maybe that's why it sounds original. I guess that's why, because everybody has something to say, but we're all really different.
And speaking about the band, it's obviously an international
Mhm.
band from all over the world. Tell us a little bit about how the band came about and how it works really with the geographical differences.
Mhm. So I'm from Switzerland. Laurent is from Paris. Zach, Darren, and Brandon, they are from America, and they are all now in New York at this moment. I worked with Laurent before for my project Dark Matters. He was the bassist on this, and I was nominated for an award for this one in New York, and that's how I got to New York. But I was a fan of Imperial Triumphant already. Zachary is playing in Imperial, and I contacted him, and also Kenny. Kenny and I were already knew each other somehow, and I met them there, and I was walking in the streets with Zach, and he showed me around New York, showed me everything, and we started talking about the music we like and my classical singing background. And then he asked me if I would like to join in for guest vocals on the next Imperial Triumphant record, which was Vile Luxury back then. And he heard me singing Nina Hagen songs, and he told me he loves German singers like Nina Hagen, Klaus Nomi, that he loves German opera. And then he asked me to sing in German on Vile Luxury with operatic sounds and with metal screams. And I said, oh, okay, let's do it. And we had so much fun that we were like, we have to dedicate a whole project to that. And then he told me about Darren, who was in San Francisco during that time. He said, I was studying with this guy who loves to write black metal tunes that are Baroque inspired. Would you like to write some lyrics and melodies for this? And I know this drummer, Brandon, from the same college. He sounds like, like Animal of the Muppet Show. Like he's really like, really brutal. And I said, sure, let's try. Let's see what we can do. And this was the first record. This record was so black metal, you can't imagine. It was a total low budget experimental recording session in the basement somewhere in Queens, New York. The drummers in other rehearsal spaces next door were practicing while I was tracking the vocals. So we were just like having fun, experimenting with things. We released the album on Gilead Media, and there was a response. It was during COVID, and we were so surprised that not just we had fun with that kind of music, but also listeners, and Century Media listened to the album, and they wanted us to join and to collaborate. And we were so surprised. On this first record, Laurent was not there yet. We didn't have bass, but I love bass, and we were like, we need bass. And so Laurent joined in, and that's how it all came about. Laurent and I, we were both always traveling back and forth. He also works with Kenny Grahowski in this metal jazz band called Kilter, and we also wrote a metal jazz opera called La Suspendida. And So Kenny's working there, Laurent is working there, I'm the soloist there. That's like really another huge project. But it's like different musicians who are in different projects, but they all kind of exchange and have new projects with each other. I think that's the best way how to describe it. And yeah, we always have different projects. As I said, Zach is with Imperial, Laurent has his bands and the opera, me too, I have other things also. And Folterkammer is like, when we that's when we want to do that kind of music, that's Folterkammer. And so all these musicians involved in this band, they love this kind of mix, and that's what we do. So that's how it came about, and that's how it works. And sometimes we meet here or there. Like on Weibermacht, there are songs, one of them has been written in Paris, one of them has been written in Brooklyn, some has been written like remote, everybody in his own place. So that's how we are organizing ourselves.
That's fantastic. It's fantastic. And it sounds like it all came very organically, that it all came about very naturally, and it was things that you were all quite passionate about, and it was an
Yeah.
outlet to you, all just something that, as I say, it's quite niche in a lot of ways.
Very
It's
much.
not
Yes, yes, you're right.
quite
Absolutely.
unique interests, and so it's great that you managed to gravitate towards each other and do something that you all really enjoy.
Very much so. And also on the first record, it's an experiment. You just make things and you will see what happens. But you also start to notice there are things that actually worked better than others. And we were becoming so curious about how to elaborate on this, how to make it more refined and defined. And there are so many options how you could interpret with mixing these styles. Weibermacht is one new attempt of working more in depth with these combinations. But I could envision, how do you say, envision like many other ways too of how to work with that. And I hope that's what we will do in the future, to also surprise us, because first and foremost, I'm a musician and I want to have fun with the music I play, or sing. And
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely see how many different directions you
yeah,
could take this, and you could,
yes,
the same musicians you could write a totally different record next time,
yes,
and it could be
yes,
super interesting. So,
yes.
it's got so much scope. I mean, it's been fascinating. Given the really kind of fervent reaction you've had to the record, what's next for you guys? Have you got plans to tour, or do you tour? Do you play live? Are you thinking of the next release? What are you guys thinking?
So we were just on the first US East Coast tour, and that was really a great experience, because it was great to see how these new songs work on stage. And so, I mean, since I'm from Europe, I definitely want this album to be toured in Europe. So we are working on this right now, and not just Europe. I mean, there are other places we would love to tour this album. And so but organizing tours is always enormous work, and we have to organize not just the tour itself, but also the financing around it and everything that goes with it. And post COVID, that's really hard. I'm sure
Yeah.
you were talking to many musicians about
Yeah.
this
And
already.
I'm sure being in various bands and collaborations makes it tricky scheduling as well. But yeah, I'm sure, like you say, I'm sure there is a lot of appetite, especially in Europe,
Hmm.
to see you guys live, and
Oh man, I
it's
would so much love to do that. And it's also an opportunity to let the songs grow, because as I said, we have very different backgrounds, and Zach, Laurent, and I, we also have our hearts in jazz music a lot. So we love to play with variations of songs. And when you play live, a song might take new directions in music, the way how you interpret it. And I think that's really interesting. And when you travel, your surrounding always also has a certain impact on how you perform. And it's for me, that's very interesting to see, how does a song work, like when you travel in America, how does it work when you are in the UK, or when you are in a German speaking country, because that's totally different, and it will have an impact on the songs. And I'm curious what is possible, that's what that it's really my engine for everything, is curiosity. And I want, and loving to play, to really play with everything, and to see the reactions of the audience. You don't have that when you just put an album out and that's it. You have to tour it, you have to perform it. And So that's but that for all of us, we try to make it happen, even if it's challenging with all our different projects and everything. But we really want to, and we're working hard on this right now. So
it'd be great to see. Andromeda, thank you so much for your time today. I mean, I'm not sure we've ever had an interview on Heavy Matters with such a detailed both history lesson and pure musical lesson. So it's actually been really interesting to chat to you. And I did have a little bit of trepidation before joining onto the call to how it would go, but you've been fantastic. So thank you so
thank you
much.
so much. Whenever you're scared, I will come with my whip.
So you're going to make me blush in a little bit. So.
No worries, no worries. No, my shirt is enough for tonight.
Oh, jeez.
It has to be subtle, you know.
But I hadn't noticed until you said. But,
oh, that's a good. This one is an eye catcher. It's like whenever I take it for like shopping in grocery stores, it's like the eyes are like this. It's really funny. Yeah. And you know, I love humor a lot. You know, that's actually I'm huge. I'm sure you know this, of course, John Cleese. I love Monty Python, and most of all, I love Blackadder. So there is always something in the music I do that is a bit funny, and also how I dress when I write about the dominatrix. I have to have a shirt like this. Come on. I actually trained with a pro dominatrix from London to prepare for this album writing. This was really interesting.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I'm definitely too embarrassed to ask about that. So I'm going to let
you don't have to. I don't want you to make you comfortable. But thank you so much.
I'm going to let you go. Not at all. Not at all. Thank you again, and best of luck with whatever's coming next. We'll be fascinated to see what you do next. So yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Good.